one of the first big matches you had in WWF that were just, big featured and everything kind of went right was the Last Man Standing match with Triple H at Fully Loaded 2000. Can you talk about that match and how important that match was to you kind of getting up the card in WWF and being seen as more than just, a mid-card comedy character or whatever? How important was that match?
Well, I mean, Triple H and I didn't get along back at that point in time. There was a lot of animosity for real because I had the audacity to come to WWE, and that people didn't like it. They didn't want WCW guys coming to WWE because they felt we were inferior. So you could do 10 things right, but if you did one thing wrong, you were under the microscope, and you were in trouble. And those guys had pull, so they would bury you to Vince. And it was just politics, right? And I didn't really know much about politics at the time, but I learned very, very quickly. And I remember Triple H, when I first got there, he said, if you ever need anything, give me a call. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And I remember we were in San Jose, and I was trying to find directions to Stockton or something like that, and I couldn't find one. I was like, I'll call Triple H. He seemed like a nice guy. Seemed like a cool guy, and he gave me his number. This will be the start of our friendship. We're going to get along. We're going to be friends. So I call him, and he's like, hello, who's this? It's Chris Jericho. Yeah? Hey, do you know how to get to Stockton? Yeah, you want to know how to get to Stockton? Yeah, buy a map. And I hear this laughter in the background of X-Pac and Road Dogg. So hangs up, and I'm like, well, there goes that friendship down the toilet. So that was kind of the initial, idea there. And so there was a lot of issues between the two of us. There was a problem that I had with China that was kind of predicated by him, and I almost got fired about a month in because Vince said, the problem is I got called into a meeting with Vince, Jim Ross, and Blackjack Lanza, and that's when Vince was like, the problem with you is you're the drizzling you're not worth the paper your contract is printed on. And I was like, you're green as grass. I'm like, man, jeez. Lighten up, dude. So anyways, it was very, very, lots of heat, shall we say. So when I finally got the chance to work with Triple H, now if you remember prior to The Last Man Standing, I won the WWF title, WWF at the time, WWF title from Triple H on Raw for like 15 minutes. Which if you watch that one back, it's in State College, Pennsylvania, the crowd loses their mind when I pin him. And that's where it's like, if Vince just would have gone with this, he could have built me into a big star at the level of all those other guys, and so everyone would have a different shade to paint with, right? But that's not the way. You have to earn respect and earn your way there in WWE, so whatever it was. So I had to give the belt back after 50 minutes. But I know that Vince saw the reaction, and Triple H did too. Didn't matter if you like me or not, business is business, and people like this kid. So they came to this pay-per-view, I believe it was called Fully Loaded, when it was going to be 3 of the young guys, up-and-coming guys, against 3 of the established guys. And I could be wrong on this. You guys probably know better than I do. But I believe the 3 matches were Kurt Angle versus The Undertaker, Chris Benoit versus The Rock, and Chris Jericho versus Triple H, Last Man Standing. And this was kind of our coming out party of getting a chance to really show what we could do. And Triple H was great in that match. We had a great match. I still remember Stephanie McMahon has the hardest slap in wrestling. And she slapped me in that match so hard. It's like one of those slap contests that you watch these 2 big guys and they slap each other in the face until someone falls down. I wanted to fall down. It was very stiff. And I remember, too, that the table that the finish was based around, there was a big sign in gorilla position that said, stay away from the Spanish announce table. Awesome. Stay away. The producers said it. The agent said it. Everybody said it. There's a sign in the gorilla, stay away. And the match before us was Chyna versus Perry Saturn. Guess what Chyna did not do? She did not stay away. They hit this table and collapsed it. And something in my head says that maybe she might have done that on purpose because it was her ex-boyfriend that was in the next match, maybe, I don't know. But anyway, so that's our finish. And they do this right at the end, and we have like 5 minutes to come up with a new finish. It was supposed to be like a belly-to-back through that, something along those lines. And basically what we had to do was go to the dasher boards, which are those, like the black boards, like just basically little like fences, and do it off of that, which was really hard because it's, and Triple H and I are not the most agile of guys. And I remember like we're climbing on this thing, so, you ready? You ready? I think so. Let's go. And we finally did the finish. So the finish, we land on the table, and both guys are out. Crowd is going bananas because they just know that Chris Jericho is going to get up right 1 second before Triple H does. And with last man standing, you count to 10. And whoever doesn't answer the 10 count loses. And everyone knew that I was going to answer the 10 count, except for he answered the 10 count, and I did not, and he won. And I still look back on that and go, why would you put over Triple H, the heel, who's already been world champion multiple times, instead of the hot young upstart who just tore the house down when he won the world title and got this reaction? And it still was another little dig where it's like, if it was me, I would say, dude, put the guy over. I mean, I called Vince the first time I worked John Cena on a pay-per-view and said, Vince, let me put him over. Why? Because I think he should go over. That guy doesn't have anything. John Cena. He's got nothing that impresses me. I was like, just let me put him over. So I put him over, but that's what a veteran does for a younger guy. When the time is right, you don't do it every night. But in my opinion, that was a great night for me to go over, and I didn't. So it was a great match. It was my first great match I had in WWE, but I just feel it was the wrong finish because it's a last man standing. It's like losing a cage match. You really don't lose. Someone calls out the door or someone goes over the top. No one's getting pinned here. And we both went down. I should have got up at 10. He falls down at 9. There's a new hero in the company. So once again, I can't book it, but I look back and think it should have went that way. It didn't, but does it affect the quality of the match? Absolutely not, because it was a very, very, very great match for sure.
Speaking of you and Triple H, the following year you guys have that tag match that main events Raw, you and Chris Benoit against Steve Austin and Triple H, which was voted, I think, at one point Raw's greatest match. And that was a time where they didn't. Rock was out, Rock was gone. They hadn't pushed anybody new or young, and you guys were put into this position. I mean, talk about the experience of doing that match.
Well, once again, Chris and I were always on the edge, on the verge of getting the push to the next level. But there's something about us that Vince didn't quite believe in at that point in time. Maybe it was the height. Maybe it was, I don't know. I'm not sure what it was. But this is when they had turned Austin heel, which, as we look back in retrospect, was kind of a bad idea. But then they put Austin and Triple H together. And they were called the two-man power trip. And they became, I think, the world champion, the intercontinental champion, and the tag team champions. They had all the titles. And I remember a week or two before that, I showed up in Oklahoma City, and I had a match against Triple H for the intercontinental title. And there was this writer called Irish Pete. Why? Because he was from Ireland. How clever is that? And he had this chipped, like, Jim Carrey and Dumb and Dumber tooth. And I can't do an Irish accent, especially for you guys. It'll sound like an English accent. But he's like, I'm going to pretend because I have to say it. You get a match against Triple H for the Intercontinental title. And I was like, oh, wow. Who's winning? You are. Just kidding. He's winning. I remember just looking at Irish Pete and just saying, I want to knock that stupid Jim Carrey tooth right out of your stupid Irish head, you dumb moron. Anyways, so it was kind of like they would win, and finally it's all coming to fruition where Benoit and Jericho are going to get the big victory. And believe me, it was a big victory to go over on Triple H at this point in time, and Steve Austin as well. I mean, you can't get any bigger than those guys, and not only bigger from a fan standpoint, but from a Vince McMahon standpoint. These are his guys. These are his money makers, right? So we go into the match, and it was in San Jose. And once again, I sound like I caught a fish that was this big. If you watch this match back, the crowd is losing their minds. It was such a great time for wrestling because it had just started. to get to the next level of action, but people hadn't seen everything like they have now, so they're kind of a little bit desensitized. This one, they bought into it. They were so excited and so into it. And the finish of the match was going to be that a bunch of different things happen. I end up hitting Austin with the lion salt. Triple H comes in with a sledgehammer. I move. He hits Austin with the sledgehammer. I take Triple H out. Benoit does a diving headbutt. 1, 2, 3. We win. And this is going to be our coronation to the next level. Well, a funny thing happened. I have Steve Austin in the walls. Triple H comes in from behind to knock me down and take me out onto the floor. When he hits me, he was supposed to do something else too, and then suddenly he's gone. And when that happens, you know, something's not right here. Because these are 4 pros amongst pros. You don't forget spots, or you don't do stuff, you know what I mean? And I went onto the floor, and he's just lying there, like, not even screaming. He's there saying, like, I think I tore my quad. And I was like, what? I think I tore my quad. So I was supposed to give him the walls of Jericho on the announce table. If you guys have seen the match, you know what I'm talking about. And I said to him, what do you want to do? And he said, just keep going. And I said, do you want me to give you the walls? He said, yes. So I go up on the table. Once again, torn quad, what is the walls of Jericho? It works your knees and your legs, right? And so I remember turning him over onto this table and just hearing this like real grunt of true pain, not selling. And just, it's like the straightest walls of Jericho ever. I'm trying to hold his legs as straight as I can. You know, usually you'd be locked right in. And once again, animosity or not, this is one of your teammates who's hurting. So I put it in there, and then I go inside and do what I'm going to do, and I hit Austin with the moonsault. And I'm like, there is no way he's going to get in here with that sledgehammer. But somehow that came in with the sledgehammer. He did the spot, and Chris hit the finish, and 1, 2, 3, and people are going crazy, and new tag team champions, Chris and Chris. And I remember, like, I am not Triple H's biggest fan, but this guy earned my eternal respect by just how tough he was to go through that. You know, and I remember, right? And it sucked because when you have a great match, you go to the back and you have the celebration. Everybody in the back is just high-fiving, and Vince will give you a handshake and a hug, and that's rare. It's like having like a dad who doesn't love you that finally, you know, come here, kid. You're like, oh, I love you, Dad. And we didn't get that because we had to go to the trainer's office where we found out that Triple H was going to be out for the next 6 months or whatever it was. So great match, but just completely like because he got hurt. But when you look back on it, it was one of the most incredible matches for so many reasons. And like I said, I don't know what a 5-star match is, but I remember like it didn't get 5 stars. And I was like, well, I don't know how much better you can get than that. Plus, this guy got hurt. Like, this is a classic moment in pro wrestling history, and I still feel that to this day.
So, the last part of our Triple H trilogy within your matches is, you know, you have the WrestleMania 18 match, and even though it's a good match, it doesn't really matter because it follows Rock and Hogan. So, you know, that's out. But then you guys have the Judgment Day 2002 Hell in a Cell match, and that almost felt like that was, I mean, that wasn't going to be the match at WrestleMania, but it felt like that was the Triple H and Chris Jericho match with how the characters were at that point. Did that help and give you any vindication for maybe feeling a bit let down by WrestleMania?
Well, I mean, in a way it did, and here was the cool thing about it was, like, the night after WrestleMania, after being the undisputed champion and losing it, I showed up for Raw in Montreal, and I had nothing to do. I was off the show. Now, this isn't like modern times like AEW, where we just have such a big roster, not everybody's on the show every week, and it's not a big deal. Back then, if you're not on the show, something wrong. I was like, I just been the undisputed champion for 4 months, and I'm not even on the show. And I remember I pitched this idea where I would come in, and then someone would tell me I'm not on the show, and this guy, Sylvain Grenier, would go, oh, you're not on the show, and I would just beat the shit out of him. That's my spot on the show. And so Vince approved it. I remember I said to Sylvan, I said, dude, I apologize, man, but I'm going to kick your ass. He's like, oh, whatever, go for it. And I beat him up so bad because I was legit mad. And I took it out on this poor French-Canadian guy who's the anyway, so it doesn't matter. But I remember Undertaker was watching, and after he goes, he goes, that was real to you, wasn't it? I said, yeah, you want some? What did you say? Nothing. So that was where I was at. Like now, it's like, what am I going to do? So then they come up with the idea of this Hell in the Cell. And, it's just basically an attraction, and it's kind of a blow-off, and, it's fine. But the thing I really am proud of for that Hell in the Cell is it's the first one that didn't feature a crazy bump off the top of the cage. That was kind of a Hell in the Cell standard between Mick and Sean took the first one off the side, and this guy's fallen, and Rikishi's fallen off into the back of the truck and all these other things. So we said, let's make this match a bridge to where people don't expect to have someone fall off every time. Because sooner or later, you can't do that all the time, So then we thought, well, why don't we do the finish on top of the cage? That's interesting. It hadn't been done at that point in time, right? And I remember when we pitched the idea to Vince. He's like, well, the idea of the Hell in a Cell is nobody can get out of the door. How are you going to get up there? And then I'm thinking, well, maybe we can crawl up the inside. And it's like, well, there's not a hole in the top of the cage. And how are you going to crawl across? And then Vince goes, why don't you take your arms and shoot some web to the top of the cage and slide up there? Like, what? Triple H goes, he went and saw Spider-Man last night. Can you imagine Vince McMahon at the movies? Imagine if you guys went to the movies and you see Vince sitting there. I remember once I asked him if he wanted to go to AC/DC with me at the Garden, and he's like, and I'm like, what if he says yes? Is he going to show up in a suit? What's he going to do? He couldn't make it, thankfully. Are we going to sit do we sit in the stands? Do I have to rent a box? How the do you go to AC/DC with Vince McMahon? Anyway, so we couldn't use spider's webs because we're not mutants. So we came up with the idea, which once again, all this stuff, when I'm telling it to you guys, you're like, yeah, we've seen it all before, but at the time you hadn't seen it. How do you get out of the cage? Well, someone has to get taken out. Cameraman, or how about the referee? So Timmy White, one of the greatest guys I ever met in the history of this business, he just passed away. Here's the Timmy. We love you, Timmy. Okay, we got it. We're saying it inside. So he would love that by shut up, Jericho. They're trying to chant my name. So I think it might have even been his idea. We pitched it to him. So we have to bump you, Timmy, so you get taken out of the cage. And it can't just be a normal ref bump. Someone gets squished in the corner, and he's like, I think from what I recall, it was actually his idea. And he said, I'll be on the ring apron, go to charge at Triple H, have him move and push you into the ropes, which is ipso facto hitting me. I'll take the bump off the apron into the side of the cage. Now, the thing is, Hell in a Cell, there's a big space between the apron and the cage. So there's a little bit of a jump. And he said, I remember he had a Boston accent, very much hard. He goes, hit me hard. Else it's not going to look good. Hit me hard. Hit me really hard. So obviously you don't want to hurt anybody, but when I came off, man, I'm like, Timmy, here we go. And I came off, and I hit him. I still use the move quite often because it just looks so vicious. If a guy's in the apron, I run as fast as I can and just basically shoulder check him off the apron where he goes into the guardrail. So I hit him really hard, and he took this bump right into the cage and legit basically destroyed his shoulder. He actually never refereed again. He became a backstage guy. But he's like, I told you to now let's go have a beer. But so he's down, and now because the ref is down, we got to get him out of here. Undo the door, come in with the medical team to take out the ref, and here goes Jericho, right? And then we start fighting whatever it was where he's chasing me, and I can't remember. I got nowhere to go, so I start climbing. He goes to the desk and pulls out a barbed wire bat. And now we're climbing to the top, and he's got this bat, which I remember, he's like, how am I supposed to carry a bat and climb? Like, it's like, yeah, you're right. So we had to put, it's very simple, but you're thinking, how do we do this? So we put a little loop of like a leather loop so he could drape it around his arm like a purse. So he would have it on his arm as he's climbing. And this big giant bat is hanging. And we go to the top of the cage. So you're on top of the cage. Now, once again, they reinforce the top of this Hell in a Cell. And I'll tell you guys something else. If you went to a Hell in a Cell show, if you're on the ground looking up, you're like, that's not too bad. I mean, it's high, but it's not that high. I had an idea where I was going to jump off the top of the cage onto Triple H and the Un-Americans, who were my minions at the time. I climbed to the top of the cage. Looking up, that's not too bad. You get up there looking down, you're like, there's no way I'm jumping off this thing. Because everybody looks this big. Like, up there, it's supposed to be like, there's no way. Mick Foley is the craziest man I've ever seen in the world. But here's the crazy spot for me. Triple H comes to the top. We fight for a little bit. He hits me in the head with the barbed wire bat. Now, the idea is we're not barbarians here, people. I don't think I'm remiss in saying that you can trim the barbs in certain points in time, especially when it involves a baseball bat getting hit into my head. This thing gets stuck in my head because the barb got intertwined. The cut barb still was enough to get, and it pulled this huge chunk of my hair out. And I'm like, mother, hurts. Then the next spot is he kicks me and hooks me in for the pedigree on top of the cage. Now, doesn't sound too crazy, right? You go up there and see how crazy it doesn't sound. I'm now looking through the top of this cage with my arms behind my back, looking at this ring, and all I can think of was the roof collapsed with Mick and Undertaker. And now I'm convinced this roof is going to collapse when he pedigrees me on the top. He's going to be right on top of me, and he's going to drive me all the way to the mat, and it's going to kill me. And that's all I'm thinking. And so when he gives me the pedigree, it's like in slow motion. I'm like, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. I'm going to die. I'm going to... That was easy. Didn't even hurt. So I did not die. I'm still alive. But that was terrifying, and then that's basically what the finish of the match was. So I was really proud of the fact that we gave a great match. Once again, the bridge between having to take this crazy stump bump just because it's what you do in a Hell in a Cell, and then having, okay, now we have gone on top of the cage, and I believe for the next few Hell in a Cells, they actually stayed inside the cage. But we had introduced the concept that you don't have to fall from the top, so it kind of made it a better match, in my opinion, and more people could be in it because you weren't expected to take this crazy bump from the top to the ground.